In the vastness of a desert where absolute silence reigns, a narrator reflects aloud, convinced that the peaceful will be the future masters of the world. Abruptly, a meteorite crashes into the ground, creating an immense crater and announcing the arrival of an asteroid destined to alter the course of history. 67 years later, in an underground bunker, soldiers fire blindly down corridors enveloped in chaos, trying to close the entrance against the terrifying growl of something approaching. One of them misses his shot and is silently devoured by the unknown beast, while his companions try to flee desperately. One is caught and the other comes face to face with horror: giant predatory ants. On the surface, Jorge and his friend, believing they have found the perfect place to extract copper and get some money, enter a tunnel armed with tools. However, they discover that the site has been recently ravaged by ants. Jorge, intrigued by the bullet casings scattered on the ground as if they were scattered jewels, stumbles upon an abandoned weapon. However, Jorge's fortune vanishes in an instant when the ants emerge and his life abruptly ends. His friend, in a desperate attempt to escape, runs towards the exit, but his fate seems already decided. Meanwhile, in the calm of his home, Brian delights in watching a classic horror film. His brother Lucas, with whom he shares a love for motorcycles and desert getaways, interrupts him, united not only by fraternal bonds, but also by their common passion. Both are filled with enthusiasm upon discovering that Brian's favorite actor will be attending a party in the desert. With determination, they venture out on their motorcycles, ready to face any eventuality that fate may throw their way. Brian is surprised to discover that they will pick up Lisa on the way, a detail that Lucas had intentionally omitted. The anticipation of what is to come is mixed with the excitement of a journey that promises to be memorable. With a smile, Lucas urges Brian to address his feelings and talk to Lisa, who joins them, radiating happiness. During the trip, they discuss the Eradicator films, and Brian is impressed by Lisa's vast knowledge of these movies. However, the tone of the trip changes when the Risco brothers decide to show off. Lucas displays his skill with the motorcycle, briefly leaving Brian behind. With a spectacular maneuver, Lucas takes the lead and Brian is left meditating on the almost cinematic turn his day has taken. Upon arriving at the event, Lucas makes a spectacular entrance that Tim and Craig observe with disdain, disapproving of his ostentatious behavior. After a brief tense moment, Lucas and Brian head towards the heart of the party. There, Brian cannot take his eyes off Lisa. Lucas tries to give him advice on how to start a conversation with her, but just as Brian decides to approach her, Craig tries to get Lisa's attention, proclaiming himself more romantic than combative. Discouraged by the situation and annoyed by Craig and Tim's behavior, Brian chooses to walk away from the party. Meanwhile, Lucas is taken to the stage to address the crowd, taking the opportunity to highlight Brian's skill as a mechanic and praise his work. In the vastness of the desert, Brian, driven by curiosity, had ventured alone to explore that vast and desolate landscape. In front of him, as if waiting to be found, rested an abandoned car on the other side of a ravine. Just then, Lucas appeared, carelessly tossing an empty beer can towards the ravine. Seeing him, Brian asked if there was any more beer left for him. Together, they shared a moment of genuine camaraderie, leaving past tensions behind. Taking advantage of that moment, Lucas confessed to Brian that the solution to forgetting his love worries and the drink was behind the hill at another party. Brian shared his doubts about whether he was enough for Lisa, but Lucas, with words of encouragement, encouraged him to face his fears. In the middle of the conversation, Lucas threw his second can in the air and, noticing a nearby tunnel, convinced Brian to explore it together. They discovered an old forgotten research center. Without hesitation, Lucas slipped through a gap in the fence. The place evoked the setting of a horror movie, one of those where warnings are ignored and an uninhabited place is entered, aggravated by the effect of alcohol. Despite the fact that the party was still in full swing beyond the hill with a good number of attendees, they chose to go further into the bowels of the building, where, to their surprise, the lights suddenly came on. Brian tried to persuade Lucas to return to the celebration, but Lucas was determined that they would discover something amazing if they continued. On the other hand, Lisa, full of worry, was trying to locate them in the arid terrain without any success. In this interlude, Zig saw an opportunity to win over Lisa, who dismissed him without a second thought. Once inside the building, upon reaching the cafeteria, Lucas suggested moving the party there. They were astonished to find a working refrigerator and fresh food in a space that gave the impression of being uninhabited, which added a mysterious and fascinating enigma to their adventure. During the night, Brian was surprised to notice that although the main door was wide open and the light was still on, no one else seemed concerned about the presence of electricity at the site. The uninterrupted activity of the refrigeration system confirmed that the power supply was active, which deepened his curiosity about the reason for this anomaly. In his exploration, Lucas found a corner that appeared to function as a storage room. Driven by curiosity, he decided to inspect some bulky sacks, putting his hand in one of them, an action he would soon regret. A sudden roar startled them, and although they initially chose to investigate, fear and tension finally persuaded them to leave the place. If they had gone a little further, they would have discovered a door that warned of the presence of an ant colony. Upon returning to the dining hall, they encountered one of these giant ants devouring something. Silently, they moved towards the kitchen, where Lisa called Lucas. Although he tried to describe the situation to her, Lisa only understood that she had to enter through the main door and decided to venture through the tunnel after the communication was cut off. In the kitchen, Lucas and Brian, equipped with kitchen utensils, prepared to defend themselves. A noise caused by a piece of machinery falling attracted the ant towards them. The insect briefly inspected the kitchen before returning to the dining room. Taking advantage of a moment of calm, Lucas couldn't resist opening a beer, but the sound of the cap popping off attracted the ant again, this time more aggressively. Brian confronted it with his spatula, and they both ran to the dining room. In the chaos, the ant managed to separate them, and Brian, in a desperate act, tried to trap it. In an unexpected turn of events, as the ant launches a surprise attack, Lisa enters the scene dramatically with a fireman's axe, demonstrating extraordinary courage by eliminating one of the troublesome ants. At the same time, two friends try in vain to repel another of these insects, throwing empty beer cans and kitchen utensils at the monster. Lisa's intervention is not only courageous, but also crucial, because just when more ants join the attack, attracted by the commotion, the three friends are forced to take refuge in a room, making sure to firmly close the door behind them to protect themselves. Amidst the chaos, Lucas stumbles upon a computer monitor and accidentally activates an educational cartoon intended for the site's employees, along with a camera connected to a security turret located in the ants' nests. This provides Brian with the opportunity to neutralize several of these insects from a safe position. However, the most surprising discovery is a video of Dr. Renard, in which he confesses to combining ant DNA with that of an asteroid and explaining that the ants require ethanol to reproduce. Lisa, ever insightful, concludes that there is plenty of ethanol at the party, and they begin to formulate a plan to alert the other guests. As they try to share their strategy, the situation escalates dramatically. A young woman starts a show that captures everyone's attention, but it is abruptly interrupted by the eruption of a giant ant heading towards one of the beer kegs. With an agile movement, the ant rams a young man, hitting him with the keg and unleashing chaos. The sequence becomes even more surreal when the ant begins to spread a mysterious liquid, while more ants emerge from the desert, turning the party into absolute chaos. Craig and Tim, distressed, try to flee the turmoil by bike. In a frantic escalation of events, only Craig manages to evade the bizarre hunt that seems straight out of a science fiction movie. Meanwhile, Brian, Lucas, and Lisa, aware that everyone is in danger, run towards their truck to seek help, but an ant rams them, forcing them to make a desperate escape on bicycles. In the tumult, the group is scattered. Brian and Lisa arrive at a cliff. Brian, determined, prepares to jump, but Lisa stops, unsure if they will survive the fall. In that tense moment, Brian decides to confess his feelings for her. Lisa tries to answer him, but it is clear that Brian does not understand the depth of her words, especially when an ant captures Lisa from behind, at a moment when Brian would have preferred to be the one abducted. At that critical moment, Lucas arrives and without hesitation joins the effort to rescue Lisa. They advance into the caves and find an immense ant nest where they keep the captured people to feed their young. While Brian is briefly distracted by the shine of the ant eggs, he manages to refocus on the main objective, to save Lisa. However, just as an ant discovers them, Dr. Renard suddenly appears and neutralizes the threat. Renard warns them that they will need special equipment to carry out the rescue, facing them with the dilemma of having to leave Lisa behind momentarily while they devise a plan to return and save her. Anguished, Brian inquires about the beginning of this whole situation, and Renard explains that the problems arose when an asteroid hit Earth in the 1950s. Unexpectedly, a flying ant attacks Renard, leaving him seriously injured. With Renard incapacitated, Lucas and Brian head towards the laboratory in search of solutions and resources for a new rescue attempt. In the colony, Lisa awakens to the piercing gaze of an ant. As they make their way to the prototype warehouse, they encounter a turret on the ceiling, a completely unexpected find. Brian whispers that it shouldn't be there, and Lucas suggests that perhaps Renard never intended for them to have access to weapons to confront the ants. Upon entering, the first gruesome discovery is the corpse of a person. They carry out an exhaustive but fruitless search, until on their way out they observe an ant feeding on the corpse. Lucas proposes that they should alert the town about the danger, but Brian argues that it is more vital to rescue the people trapped in the colony tunnels. In the end, Brian convinces Lucas to follow his strategy. Lucas insists they won't proceed without first enjoying a beer, which, to their surprise, is the secret key that activates the opening of a hidden door in the laboratory. This ingenious mechanism was the work of scientists who loved a good drink. Upon crossing the door, they discover not only weapon prototypes, but also armor. Equipped, they confront the ants in the corridor. Although Lucas soon runs out of ammunition, they choose to take bicycles and enter the tunnel to rescue those trapped. They manage to free Lisa, and while Brian confronts a winged ant, he also runs out of bullets. Finally, both are forced to flee on a dirt bike. In their desperate attempt to escape, Lucas sacrifices himself to cover his companion's retreat. Brian, with sharp wit, leads the ants towards vending machines that shoot when they detect movement, eliminating almost all of them, except for a terrifying flying ant. Lucas, ensuring his friends escape, plans to destroy an ant egg nest using alcohol. At that moment, he hears complaints from another corner. It's Tim, and Lucas is not at all enthusiastic about rescuing him. On the other hand, Brian and Lisa encounter a challenge that requires a daring jump. They manage to overcome it, leaving behind the flying ant, whose wings are damaged. They come across an abandoned truck and decide to use it as their escape. Suddenly, an ant with tarantula-like abilities tries to drag the truck towards a cliff using cobwebs. However, they discover that one of the weapons, which they thought was empty, still contains bullets, and Lisa uses the weapon to neutralize the threat. Upon returning to the shelter, Lucas manages to save Tim and prepares to burn the ant's nest. Just as he is about to light it, something distracts him and he drops the lighter. Luckily, Craig arrives just in time to rescue Lucas and prevent a catastrophe. Back at the starting point, Brian finally has the opportunity to enjoy that beer he craved so much. However, his moment of rest is abruptly interrupted by a distant noise. The Eradicator is approaching. In a desperate effort to calm him down, Brian offers him his beer. But just as Brian tries to negotiate, a surviving ant launches a surprise attack. Lucas, Lisa, and Brian quickly prepare to face this new threat in a battle that promises to be fierce. If you liked this video, please show your support with a like, and by leaving a comment below. Your support really means a lot to me. Thank you. Asa